We're in a fascinating spot today. What a fun, unique deal we've got going on out here at the Madden compound as we celebrate the release of the book Mornings with Madden, but also celebrate John and get to do it with incredibly interesting people, including the person sitting right here in front of us right now on the River Islands guest line. Joining us, Mooch, Steve Mariucci.
Hi,
hey,
guys.
how you doing, man?
Great. It's good to be over here. This is going to be a lot of fun tonight.
This is going to be a lot of fun. What are you looking forward to most?
I don't know. I'm just seeing the family, looking around this museum. Okay, that's what this is, right? And talking about John Madden. I'm sure we're going to have some laughs.
No doubt. And when you think about John Madden, the first time that you encountered John Madden or your history with John Madden, because everybody is intertwined with John in football and in the Bay Area, actually. So is there a moment where you remember meeting him or being touched by him that you want to share?
Well, I've obviously our first exposure to him was listening. Well, I as a coach, I knew of him as a great coach.
Sure,
okay,
sure.
But then for so many years, he was so good in the booth, and I've watched 8 bazillion football games as a kid growing up with my mom and dad, and he became everybody's favorite in the booth. And so when I started coaching, sooner or later, I knew I was going to have John Madden do one of our games, and the biggest memory that the thing that puts a smile on my face is when he came out to Green Bay, and I was coaching the Niners, because as an assistant, you don't get to talk to John Madden. You got to be the head coach, right? Or you got to be Reggie White or Brett Favre or the star, right? The assistants never get to even shake his hand. So when I was the head coach of the Niners, we played at Green Bay, and that's where I grew up, back there. I'm not a cheesehead, but pretty darn close. I grew up in Iron Mountain, right on the border of Wisconsin, but I grew up a Packer fan. And my family came down and this and that, and I had a lot of people come. But John and I first really met then, and I was the head coach, and we had the production meeting. Usually you do it in the green room or in a room in the hotel. Well, we did it on this bus. And it became a little bit different kind of a production meeting, because it was like, hey, Mooch, why don't you show me around town here? I go, come on, let's go. So we're talking a little bit about the game, but more about, okay, let's turn over here. There's Mike Holmgren's house. Okay, that's where. Come on, show me where Favre lives. We tried the bus over there. There's where Brett Favre lived. And come on my cul-de-sac. So we drove up the cul-de-sac where I lived, and I'm going, okay, so that's my house on the end of the cul-de-sac right there, and this is Jucola's house, and this is Safransky's, and that's the Olsons, and that's where I lived right there. And all of a sudden, 8 bazillion kids come running out, because now there's the Madden's bus on the cul-de-sac where the kids play street hockey, and the kids are going, hey Madden, and you've seen that before. And so that was our first encounter of a production meeting, was driving around Green Bay's neighborhoods and just fending off all the kids. It was a lot of fun. Then the next time it happened, well, we did it again, but I said, next time we do this, I got to have my mom bring some pasties down. You know what pasties are?
Let our listeners know.
Well, come on. So back in Michigan, back in the mines, Cornish pasties. Instead of a sandwich, we make bologna sandwiches now. Pasties have meat and potatoes and carrots, and it's a pastry, and it's awesome, and it's really good for you. And they would bring those down in their lunch bucket down in the mines. Okay, it was very good eating. Anyway, so my mom brought a bunch of pasties down for everybody on the bus, and it was like a feast. And it was like, make sure you have enough ketchup. And so it became kind of a thing that we would ride around in his bus and have the production meeting eating pasties, looking around town.
I've never heard of a progressive production meeting. Did he do this with other coaches, or was this just a you thing?
No, I don't know what he did with other coaches, but I know he didn't get pasties from any other coach, because my mom brought him down.
Oh,
so good.
Oh, that's awesome. The Madden Cruiser. I mean, it was just like that whole thing in and of itself became so iconic. I ran into it one time as a kid out on Highway 5. We stopped at Harris Ranch, and there was the Madden Cruiser in the parking lot, and he was leaving Harris Ranch, and he's walking through the parking lot. It just reminded me of that, because you said the way the kids, I mean, he's like the Pied Piper, like everybody just running toward the guy.
Well, it's not like everybody had a bus, and so
Right.
he they knew who it was, and that's one of my regrets. And I've known John now a long time, and I rode on the bus, and all of that, but I never had a chance to ride like across the country on that bus and stop at all those diners and all those small town restaurants and cafes, and that would have been awesome. I would have slept on the floor just to do that.
Yeah, no doubt. And just the idea of John at that time, and a lot of our listeners, and I'm looking at our director of sports, Lucas, who's barely in his early 30s and probably not old enough to remember those times. But
does he know he had a bus?
I don't even know if he, at the time it was like, it was Madden and Summerall, and John didn't fly, and so he traveled on the bus. But when John Madden and Pat Summerall were calling your game as a coach, you had to feel a little bit of an extra import in a regular season game, more so than now, where you get your A crew for Fox, or you get your A crew this and that, and Sunday and Thursday and Monday. There's so much football, but the Madden Summerall vibe as a coach, that had to give you a little extra feel.
Yes, and when you had them, you knew it was a big game, right? They were assigned the big games, and so it was fun in the production. They were different. Every network is, and their personnel are different when they interview you in a production meeting about the game and about who's hurt and about this and about that guy, and and of course John had his own style. Pat Summerall was awesome, but you just knew how. A couple things. You knew how intelligent John was by the questions he asked you, but and you knew that he was prepared, that he watched a lot of film, but you also knew that he was there for having some fun and getting to know you and getting to know the person, and that's where he was so good. Is he gave a darn about people and their background and their families and all of that, all of those things.
The Terrell Owens catch game. He did that game. Do you remember any specific interactions in the bigger games that he did that you were a part of? Was it always before the game? Was there ever anything after the game?
I never saw him after the game. I think when he got done with the booth, he probably tried to hightail it out of there.
Yeah, right.
And then we were in the locker room, and then going to the press conferences. Never really saw him. Would see him before the game because he'd always come to practice. He'd come in with his tennis shoes on, his khaki pants, and that big shirt hanging out, and then he would be watching practice and asking you questions about this guy and that guy and whatnot. He always. I mean, we do those production meetings on Zoom right now, and sometimes the guys watch practice, sometimes they don't. But he was very thorough. He always liked going to practice. Of course, he was on the road for 6 months.
Yeah,
he had time to go to practice.
Steve Mariucci with us here on Willard and Dibs, and we're at the Madden compound. I was thinking about this game this weekend. Madden would be doing this if he were still broadcasting. This
Which
is
game
the
you talking
game,
about?
well, the Niners and Chiefs
Yeah.
coming up this weekend. And we were talking earlier about what we perceive, at least, as a little bit of a mental disadvantage that the Niners are trying to overcome because the Chiefs have had their number. Is that something that people just make up? Have you ever experienced that as a coach where you felt like your team kind of had something else that they needed to get over because they've struggled against a certain opponent?
Yeah, when I was an assistant in Green Bay, coaching the quarterbacks, I had Brett Favre was there, and Brett was one of John's favorite guys. We would always, we a couple times we played in the playoffs, a couple times on Thanksgiving, and a couple times just down there. 6 times in a row we played the Cowboys down in Dallas. It was weird scheduling, okay? Coincidental, but it was, and they beat us. They just kept beating us, and we were young. And in 1995, in fact, the last time the Dallas Cowboys were in the NFC Championship game with Michael Irvin, the triplets, Irvin, Aikman, and Emmitt Smith. Deion Sanders played wide receiver in that game. So I was coaching on the Packers, right? John Madden's doing the game, of course. And, one of our coaches got run over. Gil Haskell hit his head on the side, went into a coma, had to stay in Dallas for a while. But, it's it was one of those, we have to get over this hurdle or we're never going to get anywhere. And then the next year, the teams met up and finally the Packers beat the Cowboys. But it was one of those things where it's like, are we ever going to beat these guys?
Is that more of a fan creation, or is that something that actually matriculates into the locker room and the coaches and the players? Because we're kind of going through it here as broadcasters and fans with this whole Chiefs thing.
It depends on which guys you're talking to, because there's a lot of new guys that didn't experience all those losses or those Super Bowl losses, right? There's some new kids that just really don't care about that, right? And but the coaches that were there, the players that were there, you're talking about different quarterbacks and different, a lot of different supporting cast here. So I suppose they're aware of it, but I don't know if they let it haunt them.
How do you see this matchup right now, based on its recent history?
Well, yeah. Forget the recent history, really. This is a new game, new teams, basically. Yeah, they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and Andy was one of the coaches that was coaching with us in Green Bay. Yeah. He and I shared an office because we ran out of office space, so they shoved us in the same little room. Anyway, the Packers are the 49ers are the best 3-3 team that this league's ever seen, right? I mean, they're very good. They're very talented. And when they have their guys healthy, and I don't know if Christian McCaffrey's coming back or when, who knows, right? They are still very, very good and very, very physical. So this game is going to be a important one. This game is going to be one that would get them over the hump or the hurdle, that mental hurdle you're talking about. Deebo Samuels is he's kind of like a twin to Christian McCaffrey. They both can do everything, right? They can play receiver, slot, running back, and return kicks if need be, whatever that is. And when they're both on the field at the same time, it's like, how do you match up, But with Kittle and Juwan Jennings and Ayuk and Jordan Mason, how's he feeling? Have you heard today?
Still in the blue jersey, so he's trending in the right direction.
He's trending, and Brock Purdy is very, very good. So this ought to be a good game, and the Chiefs are for real. I love watching Patrick Mahomes play. He's the magic man. I mean, he's as special as we've ever seen. I'm sure John would really love him.
Yeah, and doing it this year without really much of a run game and without any real wide receiver. He's doing it with a lot of tight ends and doing it
win differently. Yeah,
win differently. And I think about Kyle Shanahan and as kind of a parallel to your time with the Niners, because you were really successful, but you didn't quite get over the hump. And Kyle so far has been really successful and hasn't gotten over the hump. And what is it like as a coach when you're knocking on that door, but you're not able to really just push through it?
Trust me, you'd rather be that coach or that team that's knocking on the door every year than a team that is awful and doesn't have that kind of pressure.
Can't find the door.
So he's right there. This team is right there. It's about finishing games, right? Having a good fourth quarter, putting a good drive together. They're so darn close, and if they can stay healthy, like I said earlier, they're going to be right there again.
Do you see a parallel? I think we forget that you had spent some time on the same staff with Andy Reid. In this town, Kyle now gets compared a lot to Andy in Philly. In other words, like, you're really good, you're knocking on the door a lot, but frustration boils because you can't get that last one. No one thinks about that with Andy anymore because now he's with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, and they're the big dogs. Do you see parallels to Andy in Philly and Kyle now?
I hope not, because Andy got let go in Philly, and then he had to resurface someplace else. I can't imagine Kyle getting let go. So I hope that's just, maybe that sounds like there's some similarities there right now. But Kyle's still a good young coach, and he's got a lot more wins coming up.
Yeah, and the track record, it would be the thing, and hopefully he doesn't have to wait as long as Andy to get his Super Bowl, because that would be another 6 years here for Kyle in San Francisco before going elsewhere. And when you watch the Niners play, it seems to me that they play differently than a lot of other teams with the use of the fullback, and they love their tight end and the rest of it. What do you make of the Niners and the way they go about their offense?
It's old school. It's old school football. And you mentioned the use of a fullback. Half the teams don't have a fullback.
Right.
And so the fullback is a dinosaur. They don't use them in colleges either anymore. They're always in shotgun and spread and 3 and 4 wide, sometimes more. The fullback is like, who, what? And so I love the teams that establish the ground game. And I've said this before, though, the tight end position now, which is extremely underpaid, is maybe, other than quarterback, maybe the most difficult position or more demanding position in football, because they're having to teach these guys to put their hand on the ground and block right next to a tackle in line, and then play it in the slot, and then play receiver, and then come on in and play you or fullback, and all those protections and all those routes and all the different things that they're having. I don't know how they practice or meet with these tight ends. They're doing so many things. They're replacing that fullback that the team doesn't have. And so the Niners have a great one in Kittle, and of course Travis Kelce is the other great one, and there's a handful of them right now, and they're extremely underpaid compared to the wide receivers.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. Steve Mariucci joining us on Willard and Dibs, and I was going to compare it to the wide receiver. It sounds like you're saying that the wide receiver position is overpaid.
Did I say that?
Well, that's why I said
they got guys making $35 million a year, and then they'll catch 4 balls in a game, and that kind of thing, and they hardly block. You got to have great ones, absolutely. But what I'm saying is that the tight end is a little bit underappreciated. And then what we have, we've felt that way with running backs too. Why do you need to draft one in the first round when you get all these other kids that are in 5th, 6th, 7th round playing very well, right, making peanuts? And so maybe you don't need to draft a running back that early unless there's a great one there. But the tight end position is becoming, if you can get one, and I had Tony Gonzalez at Cal, and then of course he went over to Kansas City and Atlanta, and now is in the Hall of Fame. Those kinds of guys, man, if they can block and if they can play receiver, it's a matchup nightmare. What do you do if you were the defensive coordinator? How do you cover a guy like that? With a linebacker, not fast enough. With a corner, not big enough. A safety, not fast enough. I don't know. Double them. It's just a problem.
It's funny you say that, because I was watching tape from the New Orleans game with Kansas City, and they had Travis Kelce actually receive the snap out of the pistol and run the...
Well, he was a quarterback, in high school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It looked like it because he ran the read option with Xavier Worthy, and Mahomes is behind him, and so Andy's got all kinds of toys.
He lets... Andy's nuts, and he lets his guys... He was really close with John. They were on the competition committee together and this and that, but... he lets his players, because when you're good, you can kind of do whatever you want, but he lets his players suggest new little wrinkles and new plays and new fun things, right? And I'm not kidding. When I go to there and watch them practice, they're practicing that stuff, and they're laughing and they're having fun and they're throwing underhand, and they got a bag of tricks, man. And you can be assured that one of them's coming out in the first half against the Niners.
Well, we were talking about that earlier. That kind of comes with the resume they have, right? You can afford to play it loose and try some things, and people won't criticize you. And that feels like that's present in this matchup, because the Niners have all this angst with the way it's gone with these two teams.
I know it. The other team that's starting to play like the Chiefs on offense are the Detroit Lions. They're starting to do all that. They're very good. They can run and throw. And then now they're mixing in the goofy stuff, the fun stuff, the laterals, all that different thing. And fans love it, players love it. And even if it doesn't work once in a while, you still got that little, we're just going to keep doing this stuff.
And how important is that inside the locker room to have a team that knows that you might pull some of that out? And we talked about last year Kansas City doing the ring around the rosy, where they break the huddle and they're all running in circles.
Yep.
Does that stuff, even if the play doesn't work, does that help your overall culture, knowing that a player can raise his hand and say, "Hey, coach, let's try this"?
Now, don't think that every time there's a suggestion, the coach runs the play. Okay,
right?
But can you imagine the defense standing there watching the offense practice that in the indoor facility? Okay, let's get this ring around the rosy, right, guys? But they give it some importance.
You mentioned earlier that for the 49ers, it's about finishing. It's about that fourth quarter. What do you see? Is there an issue there, or is it circumstance? What do you see with if there are even those fourth quarter struggles?
Yeah. So as a coach, and you just shake your head and just kind of brainstorm as to what it could be. Okay, so we know we have these losses that we failed in the fourth quarter, whether it was Kyle back in Atlanta in the Super Bowl or wherever the big games are, you didn't hang on to a lead. Okay, so then you start going, all right, we're going to do a research on this, and we're going to try to find out what it is. Is it a fumble here? Is it a penalty there? Is it a defense giving up a big play? Is it our conditioning? Are we getting tired? Is it what we're eating? Do we stretch? Are we getting guys hurt during games? And I think if you do the research, you'll find that they have a multitude of reasons why they've lost. There's no one thing that says, yeah, this is it. This is why we lost all those close games at the end. It's a different reason every game. And so you just got to keep swinging and hope that another reason doesn't show up at the end.
Incidentally, as we bring it full circle, John Madden is number 1 all-time in winning percentage in games settled by 7 points or less. Somebody
Really?
shared that stat earlier. I think he was, 700% or 70% winning percentage. But just for our audience, your memories of John as a coach, because I was a very young kid in the Bay Area watching the Oakland Raiders in the 70s, but what he did as a coach, I think, sometimes gets overlooked based on all of the other Madden stuff.
Yeah, he was young. He was big. He was animated. He let his players play. He had some characters on his team. He didn't have a bunch of choir boys. He had these characters on his team, and he let them be themselves, just like John was going to be himself. Great rivals with the Steelers, and back in the 70s, the AFC was fun to watch. And I was shocked that John didn't keep coaching. I thought for sure he'd just stick around and keep winning and chase Shula's record. I don't know. But then he got tired, and obviously he had other things that he could do.
Sure did.
Obviously.
Sure did. Do you ever play Madden, and are you any good at it?
You know what?
It's funny because we've had this conversation.
Are you any good at it?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Okay, and it's like. When you get beat by a little kid, you go like, I'm not going to do this much more. It's like,
Oh, gosh.
There's too many buttons, Coach.
It's
too many buttons.
The A button. Do you know what the A button does? Do you know what that does on the Madden game?
What?
I don't know.
I don't know. How would I know that?
You're a coach. You're supposed to know,
Yeah,
Coach.
come on, Coach.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
All right.
Man.
Yes.
Thanks for
Good
coming and
Thanks,
hanging out
guys.
with us.
Thank
Good
you
luck
so much.
tonight.
Yes.
Thanks.
I'm sure.
Good
it'll be
luck. What are
great.
we doing? What are we doing?
Yeah, nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's like the A button.
We're going to eat some more M&Ms right here.
Nobody knows.
All right, guys. Thanks.
We'll react to all of that. Steve Mariucci here on Willard and